Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Mike Thompson stood in his garage, methodically packing his fishing gear for the upcoming weekend trip. At 38 years old, he still carried the enthusiasm of a young boy when it came to these annual getaways with his high school friends. 15 years of working as a postal employee had instilled in him a deep appreciation for order, and it showed in the meticulous way he arranged his tackle box. He hummed contentedly to himself as he picked up his favorite fishing rod, a gleaming beauty Rachel had given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. The weight of it in his hands brought an easy smile to his face. These were the moments he cherished most, surrounded by the familiar scent of motor oil and freshly cut grass. It was here, in his garage, that Mike felt truly at peace. The garage door was slightly ajar, allowing a warm breeze to drift in. Unbeknownst to Mike, it also created an unintended audio channel to the kitchen. As he reached for his cooler, a voice floated through the air, Rachel's voice, clear and unguarded. "He's gone for the weekend. You can come over for a wild night." Mike's hand froze on the cooler's handle. The words hung in the air, as solid and undeniable as the fishing lures scattered across his workbench. For a moment, he told himself he must have misheard. Rachel, his wife of 12 years, could not have possibly said that. But as the weight of her words sank in, his mind began to race, connecting dots he had subconsciously noticed but brushed aside over the past few months. The new clothes, the late nights at work, her sudden interest in going to the gym. Each memory now twisted into something far more sinister. Mike forced himself to take a deep breath. His hand trembled slightly as he continued packing, each movement now a deliberate effort to appear normal. The fishing trip, once the highlight of his week, suddenly felt distant and unimportant. With the car fully loaded, Mike braced himself and walked into the house. Rachel stood in the kitchen, her phone nowhere in sight, looking for all the world like the devoted wife he had always believed her to be. "All packed, honey?" she asked with a cheerful smile. Mike nodded, masking his emotions with a practiced smile of his own. "Yes, just about. I just need to grab my toiletries." He leaned in to kiss her goodbye. As their lips met, the once comforting scent of her perfume now felt suffocating, almost grotesque. He pulled away with forced calm. "Have a great time," Rachel said warmly, squeezing his arm. "I will miss you." "I will miss you too," Mike replied, though the words tasted hollow. As he drove away, he watched her in the rearview mirror. Rachel stood on the porch, waving, the perfect image of a loving wife. But just before he turned the corner, he saw her reach for her phone again, no doubt to resume the conversation he had interrupted. Mike's mind was a storm of emotions. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Rather than heading to the lake where his friends were waiting, he veered toward a quiet, hidden spot with a clear view of his home. He parked the car and leaned back in his seat, heart pounding in his chest. What was he doing? Part of him wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers. Another part clung desperately to the hope that there might still be an innocent explanation. But the cold, logical side of his mind, the one honed by years of careful observation and order, knew better. So Mike waited. His fishing gear sat untouched in the back of the car as he fixed his eyes on the house he had called home for more than a decade, the house where, at that very moment, his wife was preparing to betray him. As dusk settled over the neighborhood, long shadows stretched across manicured lawns and nearly identical houses. Mike remained seated in his car, his body stiff from hours of stillness, his thoughts a whirlwind of pain and disbelief. He sent a message to his friends, claiming a family emergency. They were disappointed, but understanding. If only they knew the truth. At 8:43 p.m., a red sports car turned onto the street. Mike's stomach churned as he recognized it. Steve's car. Steve, Rachel's coworker of 2 years. Steve, who had come to their barbecues. Steve, who had complimented Mike on his grilling skills. Steve, who now walked confidently up the front steps of Mike's home to sleep with his wife. With trembling hands, Mike pulled out his phone and began recording. The porch light illuminated Steve's face clearly as Rachel opened the door. They exchanged a brief hug before stepping inside together. Mike zoomed in, capturing every detail. His stomach turned, but he kept filming. At 9:15 p.m., the living room lights dimmed. Mike pictured them on the couch he and Rachel had picked out together, laughing over a shared glass of wine. At 9:30 p.m., the bedroom light flicked on. His chest tightened. That was their bedroom. The place filled with 1,000 memories, late-night conversations, laughter, love. Now, it had become the scene of betrayal. Throughout the night, the bathroom light flicked on and off. Each flicker felt like a stab to the heart. Mike stayed in his car, enduring wave after wave of nausea and the unbearable urge to storm inside. At 11:52 p.m., movement in the backyard caught his attention. His breath caught as he saw Rachel and Steve heading to the hot tub, the one Mike had installed as a surprise for their 10th anniversary. He steadied his phone and continued filming, documenting every damning moment. As the hours dragged on, Mike battled exhaustion and heartache. Part of him wished he could close his eyes and pretend none of it was real. But he knew how important it was to have this evidence, a defense against the lies that would surely follow. Eventually, despite his determination, Mike dozed off. At 5:17 a.m., he woke with a jolt, momentarily disoriented. Then he saw Steve slipping out of the house. Reality returned with full force. Mike raised his phone again, filming Steve's silent walk of shame to his red sports car. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Mike sat alone in his car, feeling utterly hollow. The night had left him emotionally and physically drained. But as light crept over the horizon, a new feeling began to stir in him. Not just sadness, not just betrayal. It was determination. Determination to protect himself, to seek justice, to regain control of a life that had been ripped from him without warning. With a steady breath, Mike started his car. The road ahead was long, both literally and figuratively. But for now, he had a fishing trip to fake and evidence to secure. By Sunday evening, Mike pulled back into his driveway. His fishing gear remained untouched. His thoughts were tangled in a web of pain and resolve. As he cut the engine, Rachel stepped onto the porch, a smile on her face. That once comforting scent now seemed grotesque. "Mike, hey, honey," Rachel called, walking over to greet him with a warm hug. "How was the trip?" As her arms wrapped around him, Mike caught a faint trace of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her skin. His stomach twisted, but he managed to return the embrace, forcing a weary smile. "It was good," he lied, the words bitter on his tongue. "Caught a few nice ones." "And you?" he asked, masking the storm inside him. "Did you have a quiet weekend?" Rachel nodded, casually tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Mike now recognized as her tell when she was being dishonest. "Oh, just caught up on some reading, did a bit of cleaning. Nothing too exciting." Mike listened as she spun her fabricated tale, each word adding fuel to the fire smoldering within him. He nodded in the right places, asked a few simple questions, and all the while mentally cataloged the inconsistencies. There was a wine glass in the sink, although Rachel claimed she had not had a drink. The hot tub cover was askew, even though she insisted she had not used it. That night, as they lay in bed, Mike stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on him, made all the more unbearable by the peaceful sound of her breathing beside him. In the soft glow of the alarm clock, Mike began to plan. He started keeping a mental log of Rachel's activities, noting times, dates, and coincidences with Steve's known schedule. Tomorrow, he would begin documenting everything. He needed evidence, cold, irrefutable facts that could not be twisted or denied. Over the following week, Mike committed himself fully to his quiet mission, channeling the same meticulous precision that had made him a model employee for over a decade. He volunteered for overtime at the post office, telling Rachel it was for a special surprise. Her eyes had lit up, and Mike had to fight down a wave of bitterness. If only she knew. Each extra hour worked contributed to a secret savings account he had opened at a separate bank. He knew he would need financial stability for what was coming. He refused to let Rachel's betrayal leave him emotionally and financially devastated. At home, Mike became more attentive to their teenage daughter, Emma. He noticed the confusion in her eyes each time Rachel failed to show up for her soccer games, and the quiet hurt when her mother brushed her off with yet another excuse. Mike's heart ached for Emma, caught unknowingly in the middle of a war she had not started. He began helping her with homework, listening to her stories from school, and making sure they shared dinner on the nights Rachel was working late. These moments became a refuge for Mike, a reminder of what still mattered. Amidst the unraveling fabric of his marriage, he was strengthening the bond with his daughter, building something real and resilient. All the while, he kept up the illusion with Rachel. He kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day in the evenings, and even initiated intimacy occasionally to avoid raising suspicion. Each act felt like a betrayal of his own values, but he knew it was necessary. He was laying the groundwork, gathering proof, preparing for the reckoning that would inevitably come. In moments of solitude, when the truth threatened to crush him, Mike reminded himself why he was doing this. It was not just about revenge. It was about Emma, about protecting her, about securing their future and standing up for the truth. He gathered credit card statements revealing Rachel's unusual purchases, lingerie he had never seen, dinners at restaurants she never mentioned. He created a secure email account to communicate discreetly with a divorce attorney, laying out his situation with clinical clarity. Mike spent long nights studying Pennsylvania divorce laws, learning how infidelity could influence settlements and custody. He would be ready emotionally, legally, and financially. As the days turned into weeks, Mike's quiet operation grew more sophisticated. He was no longer simply Mike Thompson, the dependable husband and father. He was becoming something else, a quiet force of justice. A storm gathering silently. To the outside world, he remained the same steady presence. But inside, a different man was forming, calm, calculated, and resolute. Within a month, he had turned into a silent investigator in his own home. Rachel's patterns became clear. Late nights on Tuesdays and Thursdays, girls' nights that coincided perfectly with the night Steve's wife, Sarah, had her book club. Mike's hands trembled slightly as he installed a hidden camera in their living room. It was disguised as a sleek digital photo frame, a gift for Rachel to display family memories. She had no idea it was also capturing her betrayal in crisp high definition. The first time Mike reviewed the footage and saw Rachel and Steve together on the couch he and Rachel had chosen together, he nearly vomited. They laughed, flirted, and shared wine from the crystal glasses gifted to them on their wedding day. Each clip was another nail in the coffin of his marriage. In a twist of fate that Mike could only describe as cruel irony, he found himself befriending Sarah under the pretense of planning a surprise anniversary party for Rachel. Over coffee, Sarah beamed. "Steve talks about you all the time," she said warmly. "He says you're the best thing that ever happened to him." Mike nodded, forcing a smile while guilt churned in his gut. He was about to shatter her world, just as his had been shattered. But letting her continue in ignorant bliss while her husband betrayed her seemed even more merciless. At home, Mike saw the toll Rachel's deception was taking on Emma. Her growing sadness was evident in her posture, in the heaviness of her words. "Mom's been working a lot lately," she mentioned one evening while he helped her with math homework. "I hardly see her anymore." Mike's heart broke. He longed to tell Emma the truth, to shield her from the storm that was brewing. But instead, he simply nodded and changed the subject. Later that week, while straightening up her room, he found a crumpled report card tucked away in a drawer and signed. Another forgotten obligation buried beneath Rachel's lies. Determined to be the constant his daughter could rely on, Mike stepped up. He went to every soccer game, cheered from the sidelines, and started a tradition of Sunday morning hikes. These quiet walks gave him insight into Emma's feelings and offered moments of peace amid the chaos. During one such hike, as they paused to admire the sunrise from a high ridge, Emma looked up at him, her eyes uncertain. "Dad," she said softly, "is everything okay between you and Mom?" Mike's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her everything, but he could not place that burden on her shoulders. "Not yet. We are just going through a rough patch, sweetie," he said gently, pulling her into a hug. "But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always be here for you." As she nestled into his arms, Mike felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Emma, for her stability, her peace, and her right to know what love and trust truly meant. With quiet resolve, Mike reached out to Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda. Over a casual dinner, he delicately voiced his concerns about Rachel's recent behavior, without revealing everything. "I am probably overreacting," he said, watching their reactions closely, "but I thought you should know. Maybe just keep an eye out at the anniversary party." Tom and Linda exchanged worried glances. Mike could see the seeds of doubt taking root. He asked them not to confront Rachel, but rather to observe for themselves. They agreed, their concern clear in their furrowed brows and subdued voices. As the weeks passed, Mike continued his quiet crusade, consulting with his lawyer and preparing for the moment when the truth would no longer be hidden, when Rachel would have to face the consequences of the choices she believed no one had noticed. Mike had spent the past month preparing for every possibility, and custody was no exception. He learned that Pennsylvania typically favored shared custody arrangements, but his attorney reassured him, The meticulous records he had kept of Rachel's behavior, combined with his deep involvement in Emma's life, would weigh heavily in his favor. Determined to strengthen his position, Mike began subtly documenting his role as a father. He saved every receipt from school supply runs, snapped dozens of photos at Emma's events, and kept a detailed journal of the time he spent helping her with homework and school projects. Every scrap of evidence became a sandbag in the levee he was building, a shield to protect himself and Emma from the flood he knew was coming. As Mike's case against Rachel grew stronger, so too did the storm on the horizon. The calm, steady face he showed the world belied the tempest raging beneath his surface. But the storm would break soon, and when it did, Mike would be ready. One evening, Mike stood in the kitchen, a calendar in hand and a forced smile on his face. "I've been thinking," he said casually to Rachel, who was scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone. "Our 15th anniversary is coming up. We should do something special." Rachel looked up, surprised. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" "A party," Mike replied, his voice brimming with false enthusiasm. "A big celebration. Friends, family, coworkers. We've been through a lot. It deserves to be honored properly." Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "That sounds nice. But isn't it a bit much? Maybe just a quiet dinner." Mike shook his head, maintaining the cheerful facade. "Nonsense. 15 years is a milestone. We should celebrate it with everyone we love." Reluctantly, Rachel agreed, her discomfort visible in the tension of her shoulders and the evasiveness in her gaze. It only strengthened Mike's resolve. Over the next few weeks, he threw himself into planning the event with suspiciously high energy. He booked a private room at the most elegant restaurant in town, known for its romantic lighting and gourmet cuisine. The irony was delicious. Invitations were sent to friends, family, and co-workers, including Steve and Sarah. Mike was deliberate in how he addressed theirs, to both Steve and Sarah. A subtle but undeniable reminder of the vow Steve was breaking. "We should invite your parents," Mike said firmly when Rachel hesitated. "They'd be hurt if we left them out." Rachel tried to object, but relented with a tight smile. She added Tom and Linda to the list. As the party approached, Rachel's anxiety began to show. She made furtive phone calls in hushed tones, pacing restlessly in the bedroom. Mike recorded each one, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. "Maybe we should scale things back," Rachel suggested one night, nervously twisting the hem of her blouse. "It just feels like a lot." Mike reached across the table and gently took her hand, ignoring the revulsion crawling beneath his skin. "You deserve to be celebrated properly," he said softly, yet firmly. The week before the event, Mike launched the next phase of his plan. Using a secure, anonymous email account, he sent a carefully worded message to Rachel and Steve's human resources department. It hinted at an inappropriate workplace relationship and suggested reviewing internal communications and security footage. He knew exactly what that would trigger. The whisper campaign would begin, and their lie would soon collapse under its own weight. 2 days before the party, Mike overheard Rachel arguing with Steve behind the closed study door. He pressed his ear close, his heart hammering. "We need to cool things off," Rachel hissed, her voice tight with fear. "People are starting to notice. The party this weekend, it's too risky." Steve's voice was muffled, but Mike could hear the irritation. "You're overreacting," he snapped. "No one suspects anything. We just need to act normal." Mike slipped away with a grim smile. The cracks were showing. The night before the party, he finalized every detail of his presentation. The slideshow was a work of art, seemingly innocent, filled with joyful images of their marriage. But buried deep within it was a devastating twist, ready to be revealed at the push of a button. While Rachel slept peacefully beside him, Mike placed evidence into sealed envelopes, each addressed to a key person: Rachel's parents, Sarah, close friends, and colleagues. Tomorrow, the truth would be unleashed, and Mike would be the one holding the hammer. The private room at Le Chateau glowed with warm light and polished elegance. Laughter echoed, champagne glasses clinked, and the atmosphere was celebratory. To the untrained eye, it was a picture-perfect anniversary party. Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda, stood near the bar. Their eyes rarely left Rachel. "She seems off, doesn't she?" Linda murmured, watching her daughter's forced laughter and stiff posture. Tom nodded, his brow furrowed. Mike was right to be concerned. Something is not right. Across the room, Steve and Sarah entered. Mike saw Steve flinch as his gaze swept the room, deliberately avoiding Rachel. Sarah, unaware of the undercurrents, beamed as she handed Mike a wrapped gift. 15 years, she said warmly. You and Rachel are such an inspiration. Mike accepted it with a gracious smile, pushing down the ache in his chest. Soon, Sarah's world would collapse. But better pain than a lie. As the evening unfolded, Mike played the perfect host. He laughed, chatted, and charmed, all while watching the slow tightening of his trap. He overheard whispers from Rachel's co-workers about recent HR investigations. The net was closing. Then, halfway through dinner, Mike stood. He gently tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. All eyes turned to him. Rachel looked up, her smile nervous, her fingers tightening around her napkin. Friends, family, Mike began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. Thank you for being here to celebrate 15 years of marriage with Rachel and me. He clicked a button on the remote. A large screen lit up behind him, displaying a slideshow of happy memories, their wedding, beach vacations, the day Emma was born. When I met Rachel, he continued, his voice warm and reflective, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. And for many years, I truly was. Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears. Mike almost admired her performance. But life, he said, his tone shifting ever so slightly, has a way of surprising you. Sometimes those surprises are beautiful, and sometimes, he clicked again. The screen changed. Gone were the happy photos. In their place, surveillance footage, screenshots of messages, intimate photos, videos. Gasps filled the room. Shock fell like a curtain. Rachel sat frozen, color draining from her face. Steve bolted upright. But before he could move, Sarah stepped into his path, eyes wide with betrayal. How could you? She shouted, her voice raw and shaking. Tom and Linda stood, horrified, as Mike continued narrating the timeline of betrayal. He played audio recordings, displayed call logs. The last slide appeared, divorce papers, already signed. The room erupted. Rachel's sobs echoed over the stunned silence. Friends murmured angrily. Co-workers grabbed their phones, already calling HR. Mike raised his hand. The room quieted once more. I am sorry, he said, his voice breaking with genuine emotion. To Sarah, to Tom and Linda, I am sorry you had to find out like this, but I could not allow the lie to continue. He inhaled deeply. I will be taking time off from work to focus on my daughter, Emma. I asked for privacy and understanding. As he turned to leave, Mike handed the envelopes to Rachel's parents and to Sarah. Everything you need is inside, he said quietly. Again, I am truly sorry. The last thing Mike saw as he walked into the cool night air was Rachel collapsing into a chair, her world unraveling around her. He felt a flicker of pity, quickly swallowed by a deeper sense of justice. The truth was out. The storm had broken. Whatever came next, Mike was ready. Rachel was telling anyone who would listen that Mike had been controlling and abusive throughout their marriage, that she had only sought comfort in Steve's arms because of Mike's alleged cruelty. Mike listened to each account calmly, never letting his expression betray the storm within. When concerned friends or family members called him to ask what was really going on, he responded with the same measured words, I understand. I will be sending you some information shortly. Then he would hang up, mark another name off his mental list, and continue with his work. By evening, Mike had emailed the carefully compiled evidence to everyone in their inner circle. Text messages, photographs, video clips, credit card statements. A towering mountain of undeniable proof that exposed Rachel's infidelity and the lies she had woven. The next morning, Mike walked into the law office of Patricia Reeves, a divorce attorney known for her ruthless precision and no-nonsense approach. Hiring her had required dipping into the savings he had built from his extra shifts. But as he laid out the case, showing Patricia his extensive documentation, he knew it had been the right decision. Mr. Thompson, Patricia said, leaning back in her chair with a cool, confident smile, you have built a very strong case. Rachel will not know what hit her. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel sat pale and shaking in her own lawyer's office. She had spent the morning frantically deleting emails and texts, only to realize, too late, that Mike had likely saved everything. I am sorry, Mrs. Thompson, her attorney said gravely as he reviewed the packet of evidence Mike had submitted. But you have no leverage here. The infidelity is conclusively established, and Mr. Thompson's documentation is thorough and methodical. We will need to advise you to settle. Rachel's world was unraveling. Her parents, once supportive and ever-present, were appalled by her actions. They refused to support her financially or emotionally. Calls went unanswered. Letters came back unopened. At home, Mike faced a quieter but no less painful battle. Emma, devastated by the truth about her mother, had withdrawn into herself. She barely spoke, kept her bedroom door closed for hours, and offered only silence during meals. Mike focused on routine, leaving her meals outside the door, keeping her favorite snacks stocked, and continuing to drive her to school without pressing her to talk. He knew Emma needed time, but she also needed help. After a week, Mike made a decision. He reached out to Dr. Salmonda Carter, a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma. Emma's hurting, Mike explained during their first consultation. As much as I want to fix this, I know I can't. She needs someone who knows how to reach her. Dr. Carter nodded with understanding. You are doing the right thing, Mr. Thompson. Therapy is a crucial step in helping her process this trauma. With Dr. Carter's gentle guidance, Emma began to open up. She started joining Mike for meals again. Eventually, she initiated conversations, small things about school or friends, but to Mike, they were monumental victories. Through it all, Mike continued documenting everything. Time spent with Emma, school involvement, financial records, and any attempts Rachel made to contact or manipulate their daughter. When divorce proceedings began in earnest, Patricia Rees presented a clear and compelling case. Your Honor, she said, her voice unwavering, Mr. Thompson has been the stable, consistent presence in Emma's life. While Mrs. Thompson was engaged in her affair, he was attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with schoolwork, and providing the emotional support Emma desperately needed. It is in Emma's best interest to remain primarily in her father's care. Mike sat quietly as Patricia laid out the facts, the truth, and felt a mix of sorrow and vindication. This was not the life he had imagined when he stood at the altar 15 years ago, but he was ready to protect his daughter and their future at all costs. Over the following weeks, the consequences of Rachel's betrayal continued to unfold. The life she had once taken for granted, the home, the respect, the image, collapsed around her. Tom and Linda, once loving and involved, cut her off completely. Rachel's desperate calls to them went straight to voicemail. Her letters, tear-stained, apologetic, were returned unopened. One afternoon, she stood outside their door, hand trembling as she prepared to knock. She could hear movement inside, knew they were home, but no one answered. As the minutes dragged on, the reality settled in like ice in her chest. She had not only lost her husband and daughter, she had lost everything. Steve, the man for whom she had risked it all, proved as unreliable as Mike had always warned. Facing his own divorce and professional fallout, he severed all contact with Rachel. His final message was curt and merciless. This is too much. Do not contact me again. Rachel read it over and over, her tears blurring the screen. She had thrown away everything for a man who had no intention of standing by her. The workplace investigation, prompted by Mike's anonymous email, concluded swiftly. Both Rachel and Steve were fired for gross misconduct. Your behavior has brought shame to this company, the HR manager had told her coldly. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. In their small town, the scandal spread fast. The affair, the anniversary party reveal, the firings, it became the story everyone whispered about. Rachel could not walk into a store or a cafe without feeling the sting of judgment in lingering stares and hushed conversations. She was a pariah. Financial ruin followed swiftly. With joint accounts frozen and no job to sustain her, Rachel found herself staying in a cheap motel on the edge of town. The peeling wallpaper, the stale air, it was a far cry from the warm, clean home she once took for granted. Meanwhile, Mike's stability paid off. Emma, still wounded but slowly healing, chose to live with him full-time. In one therapy session, she finally voiced what she had held in for weeks. I'm still so angry at Mom, she whispered. But Dad, he's been my rock. I don't know what I'd do without him. Dr. Carter smiled gently. It is okay to feel anger, Emma. What your mother did hurt you. But it is important that you can see the support your father has given you. That stability is everything. The court agreed. Mike was awarded primary custody, and Rachel's visitation was restricted to 2 supervised visits a month due to concerns about her mental and emotional stability. As the divorce neared finalization, Rachel made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. One rainy night, she appeared on Mike's doorstep, her eyes swollen from crying. Mike, please, she begged, her voice cracking. I know I messed up, but can we try to fix this? For Emma's sake? For us? Mike stood silently in the doorway, the image of the woman he had once loved now reduced to a shadow of herself. Her pain was real, but so was the damage. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "But what's done is done. We cannot go back. Not after everything. What you can do is focus on rebuilding your relationship with Emma. She still needs her mother, even if things can never be the way they were." Rachel's shoulders sagged as she stepped back into the rain, the door slowly closing between them. As it latched shut, Mike felt a weight lift. He had walked through fire and emerged standing. In the quiet moments between legal motions and therapy appointments, he focused on Emma, on rebuilding their world, one piece at a time. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their quiet street, Mike looked over at her and said softly, "Emma, I want you to know, no matter what happens, you will never have to question how much I love you. I'll always be here." Emma reached for his hand. "I know, Dad." And for the first time in a long while, Mike felt something like peace. As they sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue across the yard, Mike turned to his daughter. "I want you to know," he said gently, "that it's okay to still love your mom. What she did was wrong, and it's perfectly normal to feel angry about it. But she's still your mother. If you ever want to have a relationship with her, that's okay too." Emma leaned into his shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "I don't know if I can forgive her," she whispered. Mike wrapped his arm around her and held her close. "Forgiveness is a journey, sweetheart. It doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about finding peace for yourself." These conversations, difficult as they were, became turning points for Emma. She began to see Mike not just as her father, but as a man of integrity, someone who had faced betrayal and heartbreak with grace and resilience. As the dust settled, Mike and Emma found themselves forging a new path forward. Their bond had been tested and strengthened by the storm they had survived together. The day the divorce was finalized felt almost anticlimactic after everything they had been through. Mike sat in the courtroom, calm and composed, as the judge read the final terms. Beside him, Patricia Reeves gave a small, satisfied smile. "In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson," the judge announced, "this court awards primary custody of the minor child, Emma Thompson, to the father, Michael Thompson. Rachel Thompson is granted supervised visitation twice per month." Mike's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He had won the custody arrangement he knew was best for Emma, but there was no joy in watching her lose full access to her mother. The judge continued, "Furthermore, Rachel Thompson is ordered to pay child support in the amount of $800 per month." Across the room, Mike heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath. He knew the financial burden would be difficult for her given her unemployment, but Emma deserved consistent support. Finally, the judge concluded, "The family home is awarded to Michael Thompson to provide stability for the minor child." The gavel came down. The marriage was officially over. Outside the courthouse, Mike paused on the steps and took a deep breath of crisp autumn air. He had emerged victorious, but the feeling was bittersweet. The hardest part, he knew, would not be the courtroom battles. It would be rebuilding life from the rubble. In the weeks that followed, Mike focused on securing their future. He used his share of the divorce settlement wisely, starting by paying off the mortgage. Signing the final payment brought a sense of relief. This house, once filled with pain, could now be a sanctuary, theirs, and theirs alone. Next, he set up a college fund for Emma. "Your future matters," he told her, showing her the account. "I want you to have every opportunity, no matter what." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged him tightly. These quiet moments of connection, born from shared pain, became treasures for Mike. The rest of the settlement went into home improvements. Together, Mike and Emma painted walls, replaced worn carpets with hardwood floors, and planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard. Each change, no matter how small, felt like reclaiming their lives, one brushstroke, one seed at a time. At work, Mike's resilience had not gone unnoticed. One afternoon, his supervisor called him in. "Thompson," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I've been impressed by how you've carried yourself. Despite everything going on in your personal life, your performance hasn't wavered. You've been one of our most dependable team members." Mike nodded, not quite sure where this was leading. "We've had a supervisory position open up," the supervisor continued. "I'd like you to consider it. It comes with a pay raise and more flexible hours. I think it could be a good fit, especially with you raising your daughter." The promotion was unexpected, but it felt earned. The flexible schedule allowed Mike to be more present in Emma's life, attending soccer games, school events, and simply being there when she needed him. More than that, he found fulfillment in mentoring younger postal workers, seeing a bit of his former self in them. Helping them navigate their own paths brought him unexpected joy. 2 years after the divorce, Mike heard from mutual friends that Rachel had moved to another state. She was rebuilding her life in a city where no one knew her past. She had found entry-level work and was slowly rebuilding her career. Most surprising of all, Rachel was in therapy, working through the personal issues that had led to her infidelity. Mike felt a swirl of emotions. There was still lingering hurt, but also a quiet hope that she was finally facing her demons. Emma, now in college, had a complicated but slowly healing relationship with her mother. They spoke by phone every couple of weeks, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. During school breaks, Emma occasionally visited Rachel. Their relationship, while no longer that of a traditional mother and daughter, was evolving into something more mature and honest. "How was your visit with your mom?" Mike would ask when she returned, his tone neutral but supportive. Emma would usually shrug, a small smile forming. "It was okay. Better than last time. We're working on it." Time passed. Seasons changed. And with each passing day, Mike reflected on how far they had come. One crisp autumn morning, as he and Emma packed the truck for a fishing trip, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. Not the naive, unshaken peace of his early marriage, but something deeper, hard-earned, real. He had survived betrayal, survived heartbreak, survived rebuilding his life. And through it all, he had helped his daughter grow into a woman of compassion, strength, and integrity. As they drove to the lake, the same lake Mike had been headed to the day his world first fell apart, he glanced over at Emma. She was no longer a wounded teenager, but a young woman with fire in her eyes and purpose in her heart. They arrived just as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the still water. Mike showed Emma how to bait her hook, his hand steady as he guided hers. "You know," he said, casting his line, "I used to come here with my dad when I was your age. He taught me everything I know about fishing." Emma smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "And now you're teaching me. It's like a family tradition." Mike nodded, emotion tightening in his throat. "Yeah, a new tradition for our new life." They sat in silence, lines cast into the lake, the quiet lapping of the water soothing their souls. Mike looked at his daughter, this incredible, resilient young woman, and felt a deep, enduring gratitude. They had been through hell, but they had emerged not untouched, but stronger, wiser. And in that moment, with the sun rising and the peace of the lake surrounding them, Mike Thompson finally felt whole. The silent storm had passed, and in its wake, a new day had begun.